Hey all, here are OS Reviews. Today we're taking a closer look at the Anker Soundcore Liberty 4NCs. These are a pair of TWS wireless buds which claim to have one of the highest active noise cancellation ratings on the market, blocking up to an impressive 50 decibels of noise. For reference, AirPod Pro 2s cancel up to 37 decibels and Bose's Quiet Comfort 2s cancel up to 42 decibels. So on paper, this is one of the highest metrics that we've seen, powered by what they call adaptive ANC 2.0 tech. In terms of other specs, they do have high-res audio certification by providing the LDAC codec on supported Android smartphones. They're rated for 10 hours of continuous playback, and then you get 4 additional charges when in the case, so it gets you a total of 50 hours, although if you have active noise cancellation turned on, it's closer to 8 hours of continuous playback and up to 40 hours with the casing. Still very strong though, especially compared to, again, something like the AirPods, almost twice the endurance there, at least on paper. And these pack a 11mm dynamic driver, which is also relatively large, coming in multiple colors such as this black version as well as this pretty striking blue as well. Now, if you've been following audio products for a while, you may know that a couple months back, Soundcore actually released the Liberty 4s, the standard editions that is. So it's interesting that they haven't called these the Liberty 5s, but rather the Liberty 4NCs. It's kind of like a light model that is in between a next generation upgrade. However, compared to the standard Liberty 4s, the NC variant just has stronger active noise cancellation and also a lower price point. Again, these going for under $100 compared to around $140 on the original 4s, although the regular 4s have dual drivers compared to a single driver unit on the 4NCs. Nonetheless, we'll take a closer look at the design involvement, other packaging contents, which by the way is all eco-friendly and can be recycled. We have just some quick user guides along with some spare silicone tips to get a more snug fit, along with a standard USB Type-C charging cable. Fans of Soundcore will also know that a couple months back they released a pair of VR buds, which are claimed to have some of the lowest latency designed for gaming. I mentioned that because the 4NCs remind me of a fusion of the VR buds plus the regular 4s in terms of their casing design, where the VR buds actually opened up like this, which is a pretty dramatic reveal, although the front was just an accent light and couldn't be pressed down, so you had to still flip it open like this, versus the original 4s that was a sliding form factor. And that's different compared to the NCs, which also flips open, but now has a spring-assisted hinge, which makes that action a lot cooler and more robust. The overall frame is constructed out of a polycarbonate plastic, which is relatively small, easy to tuck away into a pocket. We have just that Type-C port for charging. And if you're wondering, yes, these do also support Qi wireless charging, and like most of the more premium buds from Soundcore, they do have autoplay and pause detection. So if you remove the buds, the music will pause, and if you pop them back in, it will resume again. They also support Google's fast pairing as well, using the latest Bluetooth 5.3 standard. Anyways, taking a closer look at the design of the buds, you can tell that their shape, again, really resembles the Liberty 4s from before. That's not a bad thing. They have a slightly longer stem to accommodate some extra microphones. There are 6 in total scattered around the body, and the stem is going to be touch sensitive for play pause and also volume controls. The back is constructed out of a polycarbonate glossy plastic, and we have just the charging contacts, a pretty conventional shape, and underneath the silicone tips you can see that the mesh here is still made out of fabric on this one, as opposed to metal, but has a little bit of branding and kind of an interesting flower-like pattern. One final hardware difference compared to the regular Liberty 4s is the omission of a heart rate monitor that was present on those. Honestly, I thought that was a pretty niche function unless you really are into sports and exercise, but you don't want to wear a smartwatch. But if you already have a wearable, then it might be a little redundant. So scrapping it, making things just a little bit longer lasting, and the price here more affordable, I think was a right decision. Overall, these had satisfactory ergonomics. They were relatively light and comfortable even for longer listening sessions in my testing, didn't really weigh me down. And for doing some movement, including jogging and running, they still stayed in place quite well using those customizable tips. And I like that they've retained the accent LED light function from the earlier gens, which kind of glows underneath the left and right sides when it's charging. And again, the presence of fast pairing means that you'll get this pop-up prompt whenever you open up the casing, and other devices that are on the same Google account will recognize these pair of buds. For example, going from this phone now to a Chromebook or to an Android tablet, the computer and tablet will automatically recognize the buds as well without having to go through the manual pairing process because it's saved to my account, which is pretty neat. Anyways, going into the companion app here, we can tell that it's still very fully featured, and then tapping inside, you're able to go into either the ANC mode, normal, with it off, as well as the audio transparency mode that will let in sound so you can have a conversation without removing the buds. So for transparency, instead of letting in everything, you can have a vocal mode where it will still try to cancel out some of the engine noises maybe, but only allow voices to pass through. Similarly, for ANC, you can go into adaptive mode, which will use the microphones to detect your surroundings and change the intensity either higher or lower, but you can also go into a manual slider and go through 1 through 5 in terms of intensity, as well as a couple of preset transportation modes, such as for flights versus for trains, buses, and for cars. That also is kind of in a decreasing order of intensity. So this level of granularity is not something we usually see in other competing buds, especially in the sub $100 price point. And then moving into the audio component, you're able to also tweak the way they sound, including a 3D surround mode. So this isn't quite as advanced as Apple's spatial audio. These are still more like a filter as opposed to providing head tracking, for example, that will change the direction of music that you're listening to. But these are still nice to play around with. It's kind of like Dolby Atmos. If you flick it on for watching movies, it kind of draws you in just a little bit more. But more practically, the other modes down here are suited for music listening. There's either a default Soundcore signature, but you can also tap there to go into a few other preset EQs, and they all make a noticeable difference on the sound that you're listening to. You can also go into a custom EQ mode to save and tweak the sliders in terms of their frequency range if you prefer a more granular control, as well as my personal favorite, which is Hear ID. This is a collaboration with a software company that specializes on doing hearing tests, and it will discern if you're not able to perceive certain segments of trebles or bass. It will boost neighboring frequencies to give you the best effect possible. And these days, Soundcore aren't the only company playing around with this trick either. Just by doing that test, which takes really just a minute or two, it will play back a series of beeps, and you can tap on if you're able to hear it. If you prefer sound version 1 or 2, based on your taste, it will give you your own curated profile without you having to understand what all the sliders are representing. Additional settings here include safe volume levels. So if it detects that you're listening to music that is too high in terms of volume, it will give you an alert. Under controls, you can customize what a single as well as triple and long press will correspond to. So by default, triple press is turned off, but again, we can use it for volume up and down if we prefer. You can even lock the touchpad to only respond when you're wearing the buds, and when you have them removed, if you're tapping on them by handling the buds, they won't automatically play pause and mess with your music, which is a pretty smart software feature. Finally, under the settings drawer, you can find additional controls like whether you want the play and pause function to be turned on or off. You can also go into a gaming mode or a low latency mode, which will be great if you're watching movies, doing something higher frame rate, but it will also slightly reduce the quality of audio that's being transmitted using Bluetooth to save on bandwidth. So if you are listening to music only and you want the best effect, you can turn that off. In fact, you'll probably want to go into sound mode and tap on LDAC. By default, it's actually turned off to conserve a little bit of power, as well as have a moderate level of latency. This will slightly increase that because it is transmitting more data, but getting you the highest resolution possible passed through using Bluetooth. Other smart modes include sound leak compensation, so using some external microphones, if it detects that your music is audible to the outside, it will try and prompt you to maybe change the tips as well as slightly change the volume levels accordingly as well. And you can also connect to 2 devices at once, so if you're playing audio from a computer and a phone, both which are paired to these buds, it will easily transition between those 2 sources as you're playing and pausing the music between them simultaneously. And finally, a find device function is now also present. So it's not quite as sophisticated as Apple's approach at the moment, but it will be using the speakers to essentially play back a series of beeps. You do have to kind of turn up the volume, and it will play it back at the maximum volume, and then hopefully you'll be able to locate the missing buds. However, because they support Google's Fast Pair and it's tied to your Google account, ironically enough, Google provides some additional tracking capabilities. And just like an Android smartphone or Chromebook, you'll be able to track its last known connection when it's actually online. Moving into audio quality and performance next. Now, when it comes to pure sound, I would say the Liberty 4 NCs also don't disappoint. They are very clean sounding, results in pretty much no static, no hissing of any kind as you're listening to music. If you have active noise cancellation turned on, you will still hear a little bit of white noise in the background, but that's to be expected. At least it doesn't tamper with the audio profile, and you get the same overall EQ regardless of if you're having it turn on or turn off. In the Soundcore signature and also Hear ID modes, I would say these are quite energetic and provide a satisfying thump when it comes to bass and drum beats, but it's definitely not overpowering. It's actually quite tight, but at the same time, if you're listening to vocals and instrumentals, it still sounds satisfying enough. Very clean sound, I would say, for the majority of genres that you try them out with. If anything, I would say trebles might be a little on the light side if you are coming from a pair of dual or triple driver buds, which can pack even more dynamic and wider soundstage, but not bad by any means, especially for single driver buds. The active noise cancellation is indeed very effective, and I would say, again, putting them in the same category as the best Bose and Sonys on the market. There's a noticeable drop in background noise, especially engine sounds and fan noises do get repressed very well. Super impressive, I would say, for a small and lightweight pair of buds. With that being said, compared to, say, larger over-the-head style headphones, which naturally isolate more noise because there's a pad resting over your ear, those can block potentially even more noise through active plus passive, but for just digital ANC, again, these are quite good for their size. Even the transparency mode, I think, is done quite well, where it doesn't feel too loud. I could have a natural conversation, so the tuning was mostly on point. And that is more or less it as far as our hands-on review of, again, the newest Soundcore Liberty 4 NCs, just offering you even better noise cancellation. That's always been an area that budget buds have kind of struggled with compared to more expensive models, and it's good to see them buckle down on that, providing yet another very cool design. And again, the companion app just is packed with features. I would say these are a very well-rounded pair of sub $100 buds. You can check out additional details if interested in links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the Liberty 4 NC.